Right, what we're going to be talking about today is the main challenge you're going to run into when you're keeping these fish. The biggest problem and most common problem you're going to come across, which is cichlid aggression.
Wow, it looks like they're going to swing to the very end.
And he wasn't kidding.
So I'm going to give you some tips on how to reduce and mitigate the aggression in your tank. You're always going to have it, you're never going to be able to get rid of it. So there's no magical solution, which means all your fish are just going to get on all the time. No matter what, with these fish, you're going to have chases, you're going to have fights, and fish that you buy are going to get beat up or die. So if that's something that you're sensitive to, and you can't take watching fish get beat up or deaths in the tank, these fish probably aren't going to be an option for you, because it's a guarantee. Fish are going to get beat up and you're going to get fish that die as well. However, there's things that we can obviously do when we're keeping these fish. Different techniques we can implement. Smart choices when we're at the fish shop, which really going to help us reduce the aggression and our chances of getting dead fish and wasting our money. So that's where we're going to start. Smart choices at the fish shop. So this is why I always say make a stock list. Get an idea of what fish you're going to put in the tank before you start adding them in. And what that does is you do the research on the fish, you've got an idea of what you're putting in, and you make smart choices. So what I mean by that is, when you're putting fish into the tank, smart choice number one, have a good variety of fish. When I say variety, I mean try not to get fish that are the same colour or similar in body shape. So these fish, they tend to show the most aggression to the fish that look the most similar to them, because they see them as more of a threat. So it's very easy with peacocks and haps to get yourself a good variety of colours, because the peacocks come in so many different sort of colour schemes and colour patterns. Your haps come in loads of different shapes and sizes, so it's easy to get a good variety of fish in one of these tanks. So you can have, depending on your tank size, you could have 2 ruby reds, you could have 2 sunshines. I've got a couple of duplicate fish in here, but if you've got a smaller tank, you really want to try and avoid that. So you want to try and keep your fish looking very different and different body shapes, and then that's going to avoid you having aggression issues. Smart choice number 2, and I say this a lot and I'll say it again, don't mix Mbunas and peacocks and haps all in the same tank. Peacocks and haps, yes, compatible. It's all about compatibility. So I don't care how many people you've seen with tanks on Instagram and TikTok and all that, YouTube, where they've got Mbunas with peacocks and haps. Yes, you can do it. And yes, it looks good and you can be successful with it and you can have no problems. That is true. I'm not saying you can't do it. What I'm saying to you is, it's not a smart choice. So you're more than likely to have aggression issues if you're introducing Mbunas into a peacock and cichlid tank, because the more aggressive fish, they're fin nippers, and in my opinion, they're not compatible for a host of reasons. So that is a smart choice for me, is don't mix your Mbunas with peacocks and haps. Smart choice number 3. When you're first buying the fish, try not to buy fish that are bigger than 3 to 4 inches, and try and keep all the fish you purchase the same size. If you've got fish that are all different sizes, some are going to be more dominant than others, and then you're really going to start having some issues. So this one, it might sound a little bit daft, but hear me out, because it is legit. So as you can see here, all the fish are coming up to me at the tank. So if you put your tank in a busy room, then that can also help to reduce aggression in the tank, because if you're in a room where people are constantly walking past, so me, myself in here, I'm always walking in and out, my missus is always in here doing bits, my daughter's running across the tank, So when you come to the tank, the fish, they all swim up to you. If you've had these fish and you're experienced in African cichlids, they do follow you about the tank. So it's a distraction to them. So the more distractions you have for the fish, the less likely you're going to get aggression. So it sounds a bit daft, but I'm a firm believer that if you have your tank in a busy room, it helps with the aggression of the fish. Because if you just tuck them away, if you've got like a fish room or you've got your tank in a garage and they're just left on their own, there's not as many distractions and things there, and they'll end up being in fights. But you can see fish chasing each other around this tank, and then I can walk up to it and then it'll all just disperse and everyone will forget. So my theory is having your tank in a busier room where there's more going on and there's more people in and out of the room can help with the aggression levels of the tank. So these things, just to be clear, what I'm going to run through today, they're just ways to mitigate aggression. You're going to get it no matter what. So,
dread it, run from it, destiny arrives all the same.
So there's nothing you can do with these fish that's going to completely eradicate aggression from the tank. They're just techniques you can implement to help you along the way. You can have a good community, which will, I'm not saying that you're gonna have a community of fish where fish are always going to die, but you're still going to get aggression and chases. The hierarchy of these tanks is always changing. You will, if you're keeping these fish long enough, you're going to run into that one fish. So when I say that, some fish just can't be helped. There's nothing that you can do. They're just murderers.
Take back the complaint. I made you a sandwich.
So they will just kill everything, no matter what tank you put them in, what tank mates they've got. They will just go after anything in the tank. So there's a couple of things you can do if you get a fish like that. And it doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. So not all of us have the luxury of having a second tank. But if you do have one, you can separate the fish into another tank, and then you can leave it there for a couple of weeks and then reintroduce it into your main display. And what that does is, if you have it in a separate tank, the fish will forget about the fish in the tank, they'll forget about the environment, and you're reintroducing them into an established hierarchy, and then they're sort of at the bottom of the food chain again, so to speak. However, that doesn't always pan out. So if you really love the fish and you don't want to get rid of it, that's something that you can implement and try. You can always get breeder boxes if you don't have a second tank. So you can get, your little mesh boxes which attach inside your display where you can put that fish and give it a timeout. It's not the same because you're not taking it out of the environment and away from the fish, but it's something that you can try. It's a good idea to have one of them as well. I do want to get one if you get any casualties. So I noticed the majority of the aggression I get in this tank is when I actually add new fish into it. And then everybody seems to become a warrior and want to show off what they're about. So it's a good thing to get one of these breeder boxes. One, if you need to give an aggressive fish a timeout, and two, if you want to put any casualties in there to give them a bit of a rest and let them heal. But some fish, they're just going to be that way, and you're going to have to get rid of them. Quite a common thing that people will do to mitigate fights, aggression, is they will overcrowd the tank. So this is a really good way of doing it. However, if you are going to do this, you do need to be somebody who is on top of your water changes all the time. You're going to have to be doing bigger water changes, and you're going to have to make sure that your filtration can manage the bioload. Because it's all well and good having an overstocked tank, but you have to make sure that the fish are going to be healthy at the end of it, and you're not having loads of toxins building up in your water column. So overcrowding is a good thing with African cichlids if you maintain your water changes and you're on top of them. So the more fish that are in there, the more distractions there is, the less likely one fish is going to be singled out, and there's a big crowd they can go into and get out of the way of a certain fish that's targeting them. So having a busy tank, loads of fish in it, is a good way of curbing aggression with African cichlids, but make sure you're on top of your water changes. Next thing you want to think about is your scaping of the tank. So these fish, they will find parts of the tank to latch onto. So they'll find corners, crevices in your rocks, different places of the tank which they'll hold as their territory. So they'll claim different parts of your tank, which is why it's a good idea to sort of scape minimal with these fish as well, because it gives them less places to claim. So I've seen experiments where people have done a completely undecorated tank and they put the fish in and they will still find little places to claim. So like your wave makers, the corners of your overflows and stuff. Sometimes if you've got heaters in your tank, they can claim them. So having less decorations can help, but I feel you need to have quite a few fish in there still for that to work effectively. But one thing you can do is, I've frequently done it on this tank, not because I've had aggression issues, but because I've flipped the rocks over because they were getting quite a bit of algae build up on the top. So I've flipped them over just to let the underside of it die off. And I've changed the scape a little bit. So there's different pockets in the rocks, there's different layout in the tank. And some of my fish which were claiming some spots are no longer claiming them areas. So nobody's got a particular spot in the tank anymore. So it's a good way if you've got a fish that's claiming a certain part of the rocks and it's chasing all the other fish away, not giving them a chance to get in. This works. Yes, obviously, these fish are probably going to claim new areas in the rocks, but if you do a change about with your scape and move things around a bit every now and then, so every couple of months if you do it, it breaks up all the territories and the claim spots, and then it can disperse some aggression. So it's worked in this tank for me. For some of the fish that were holding spots are no longer doing so. So that would be something that I would, strongly advise to do if you're starting to get these little aggression issues, is change your decor around a little bit, and break things up and create something new in the tank. And then that is a good way of obviously dispersing aggression and reducing it and bringing it down a little bit. Like I said, those fish are more likely going to claim new spaces in the tank. But when they do, after a bit, you can change it up again, and then you can refresh everything. Next one is flow. So introducing a wave maker into the tank, a high return line. So if you've got a sump, you can get different powered pumps for your return hoses. But having a lot of flow in the tank definitely helps with aggression. So it, again, is a distraction to the fish. If we've got a chase going on, they swim into a jet stream of flow, it can turn them off course and distract them from the initial chase. And then it keeps them all moving about and swimming freely as well. So flow, if you haven't got a wave maker if you're in your African cichlid tank, definitely think about getting one, because there's more benefits to having flow and a wave maker in your aquarium than just the aggression. So if you haven't got a wave maker that's introduced into your African cichlid tank or some sort of power head, definitely consider it, because there's a lot of benefits to it. One of the main ones is it will help with your aggression issues. So final one is keep your fish well fed. So everybody is less grumpy when they've got a full belly. So what it does is, if you keep the fish well fed, then obviously they're not going to be as arsey, and then there's no desperation in the fish. They're not thinking about food and competing for the food when the next meal's going to come. So keep your fish well fed, keep the bellies full, and then that can help to mitigate aggression as well. Right, so just there's a few practices. There's some of my favourite ones to use to help with the aggression in your tank. If you've got any that you think should have been on the list that you think are a good idea as well, drop them in the comments, because I'd like to hear some new ones too. But they're my favourite ones to use. Like I said, you're never going to be in a position, if you keep these fish, where you're not going to run into aggression problems. It's going to happen. There's nothing you can do to stop it. No matter what you do with your escape, no matter what fish you take out, put in, no matter if you get all different coloured fish, none of it's guaranteed you're not going to have aggression. You're still going to get it. But these are good ways to do it. So if you're having any problems, try some of these methods and let me know if they work for you.